The world is dark and lonely, but you know what isn't? The undying servitude to our Lord and Savior Hasla. 1,000 praises be upon his name. You should join us at Scenic Capitus, where the eternally screaming black fire beam that is shooting out of the grave of our ungod is constantly blasting into the sky. We don't know fully why, but it's doing that. Or you could just unlock the door and let us in with our scary-looking cultists. It could be fun. You don't know. Hello, everyone. I'm Arthur, and we're doing Conquest again. You may be asking, hey, you did Conquest last month. Yes, I did, and I really liked looking up that shit and reading from the lore compendium, but that setting is so dense, I genuinely didn't get to talk about all the things that I wanted to. I had like maybe a single sentence about the Euroni, and they are one of my main factions right now, bro. So today I want to flap my gums loudly into this here microphone in order for me to discuss one key concept. Who are the people of this setting? The factions, both good and bad, give you a bit of their lore, some of their playstyle, as I have been playing a lot of this game and seeing a lot of competition. And by the end of this video, you should be able to figure out which faction you want to play. So remember to look in the description and use my link to pick up some Conquest stuff, as well as using code Mr. Bones for a discount off your order. It will help you out to get started, and it'll help me out as well. No point faffing about. Let's hop into what I have to say. And this is going to probably be me saying it begrudgingly. The most important faction in this setting, kind of for the foundations of it, are the spires. See, the spires, or as they refer to themselves as, the exiles, are a race of alien elves, kind of, from a planet so alien to us that we don't really have words to describe the things that they have, or do. It's complicated. They fled their planet in order to avoid some horrible threat that was killing them all off in a war that they were losing. So they decided to abandon ship and show up on the lovely world of Ea. The threat they were running from, we know literally nothing about, except for the fact that it is referred to as the second hubris. We only found that out because one of the spires ended up just letting that term slip. It's ominous, but it gets a bit deeper. These are kind of the stand-ins for the high elves, as I have been saying in this setting. So they are supposed to be very different from humanity. So their idea of a big threat might be different from us, but yeah. The main thing to note is they have an innate gift known as life binding, which exudes its presence in various different ways depending on the person. It allows them to take a physical trait of them and then mix it or transfer it or swap it. It's kind of vague, with another biological trait of something that is around them. Eventually basically changing their biological material to better suit the environment that they're in. It's an adaptive trait. It's pretty cool. This allows them to take the beneficial traits from others or make a stockpile of genetic material to benefit the whole spire. And that's kind of what the spires are. They are these massive, fleshy, bony, hard towers that resemble trees that they all kind of live in. They have roots that dig deep into the ground and siphon nutrients from all around the world in order to build the spires and also give them whatever they need. Basically, everything that they need comes from the spires. Life binding has fallen a bit out of practice for this specific faction because they have mastered the science of biomancy. Seen as a heretical act by the more religious among the exiles, biomancy is literally just the manipulation of biological matter to grow it into artificial life. I think kind of the Tyranids and how they cultivate their soldiers by mixing different biological organisms together to make something cool. The spires do that en masse, force growing clones to just be big enough to hold a spear, the brute monstrosities to break siege lines, and even more. Let's talk about the abominations. They're basically just the biggest thing they can throw out. There's also the Avatara, which are unsentient, unsapient clones who are controlled and manipulated by higher-ranking members of the lineages of the spires. Think of them like puppets or an avatar. That's where they get that name if you can figure that one out. The last thing you need to know about is the sovereign. See, some of the exiles had the ability to access this amazing gift of life binding, but force it on the world around them rather than, take traits into them and give traits to the world around them. These gifted individuals coined this term as exaptation, and the best word we have to describe them is the sovereigns. They were basically able to make most of the areas livable and perfect places for their lineages to live in. And lineages are basically the genetic stock that are adapted to live in the specific environments that they created. it. At least that's how I understand it. There is only one sovereign left that we know of, because he had separate the gateway between the original home and here after he was the first one to land it as a political ploy in order to cede control of the rest of the lineages that had made it. This would make him the de facto leader of the exiles and also probably the most dangerous of the spires at any given point, considering how much he can just control biologically with a thought. But yeah, that is a bit longer of a description than I was planning on giving, but the remaining factions as a whole kind of build into each other off of prior knowledge, so it's going to get shorter and shorter as we go. We gotta talk about the Dragon War now. If you want to know more about the Dragon Spires War, watch the first video. But the Elder Dragons and their younger kin ended up getting into a war with the Spires at one point. And obviously, when elves fight Elder Dragons so powerful that they won a war against literal primordial concept gods, sure, it was a fun fight to watch, but when the eldest of the dragons showed up, they won, because they're literally just strong enough to overpower concepts like destruction, which, yeah, okay. One of the stipulations of the victory for the dragons was they weren't going to kill every last one of these spire bastards who showed up, but the spires had to teach them the art of biomancy, as it was a science / magic that the dragons had not known. They also had plans for it as well. Basically, through the use of manipulating biological matter, magic, and good old metal, a new race of individuals were born, originally referred to as the crafters, standing at about 5 feet tall on the tallest side of things, but 5 feet wide on the most narrow. These individuals were gifted with long lives and an infallible memory. Perfect recall was their gift because the dragons wanted servants who could learn something, recall it no matter how long time had passed since they'd used that skill, and then pass that knowledge on to the next generation without any errors, so there wouldn't be this kind of interpretation over what they meant. These crafters were kind of abused by some of the dragons. A lot of the dragons used them for basically slave labor, and even in the best cases, it was more they were seen as the dragons' idiot children who deserved a little bit of mockery. So, needless to say, a few of these guys, even if they were pre-programmed genetically to worship the dragons, rebelled. Only a few of them, at least, did this. The most abused were the ones who fought back, but say it with me now, the eldest dragon showed up and won pretty easily, killing the leaders of this rebellion and banishing their followers to the depths of the mine workings for their society. This was, as they say in the business, a really bad fucking idea, as you have a race of exceptionally long individuals who are stacked with muscle and never ever forget anything and have perfect recall of how you fucked them over, being sent to the center of the earth to dig for eternity. Yeah, they eventually found the chained up body of the Horseman of War. No, I'm not going to explain that, but yes, the 4 Horsemen of the Apocalypse are a thing in this setting. Just go watch my first video for context. It would take too long here, and covering all these factions is going to take a lot of time anyway. But basically, the embodiment of war in its purest form, fire and earth and magma, was chained into a massive throne, shattered into a million pieces. He was, not the throne. The crafters saw their way out, and using their superior intellect, build, and ability to build upon prior inventions, harness the power of war, sometimes literally transfiguring their bodies into pyromancer-level firebenders, and sometimes in a more Duracell kind of way, taking a chunk of war and then putting it into one of their automata that is just a giant walking tower with guns and cannons and shit. Through the harnessing of war as a power, the crafters were dead, and now the dwome were born, a race of dwarves with an intensely warlike attitude, who then proceeded to kill every last fucking dragon on the planet. No, I'm not actually joking, they did it. I think the only ones left were the ones that were captured for weapons, fun, or torture. They realized that the normal dwome on the surface that may not have intertwined with war as a race didn't really want the forever war, so they had to chill out for a little bit. And now they have a relatively stable society, all things considered, you know, being powered by the spirit of the war god, only engaging in the forever blood wars with each other when it's convenient. So if ever they need to find something else to fight, they will, you know, stop fighting each other to do that. But yeah, so with the 2 elder races out of the way, let's talk about the next category. This is going to be a whole sweeping thing that I should probably cover in one swath because they all kind of link together, and that is the humans of this setting and how many factions are made up of exclusively the humans. Well, not exclusively, because there's weird ones, but yeah, it all kind of starts with one place, and that is the Dominion of Hasla. So yeah, let's talk about how bad it could actually get now. The Dominion of Hasla is such an odd concept, as much like the Spires, it kind of ends up circling back to damn near every faction in the setting. As basically the short end of it is they were originally a tribe of essentially Stone Age humans who found a shard of godly creation, and through the weird phenomena of human worship causing things to get powerful, I guess, it ended up becoming the strongest god on the planet. The god went insane from being overburdened and hijinks ensued. Pretty nutty, right? With a decidedly Roman way of going about things, the Dominion of Hasla had gone to their god for advice whenever possible. This was for things as major as war and as minor as increasing the profit margins of their store by 5% so they can afford new nails to fix their porch. Now, we don't fully know why, but Hasla slowly started to go insane. I think it was just because of humanity pulling them in different directions, but we'll never truly know. It ended up pushing humanity to go further and further into weirder territories, its decisions making less and less sense, dedicating their entire armies to war efforts that would basically end with a miserable failure, and just overall bad advice. So, with the effort of two individuals, they had plumbed the depths of all the knowledge the Dominion had accrued in all of their libraries. See, at their height, the Dominion was this massive, almost impossible to stop group of cities. Capitus being the main city, it was a marvel of human ingenuity. I mean, it was basically just ancient Rome, but with better magic shit, but it is cool. So what happened? Well, these two individuals found the secret to Hasla's divinity. We don't truly know the depth of their learnings, but there is a split here. One fucked off, stealing every last book he possibly could from Capitus to form the knowledge base for his secular colony far the fuck away. The other, using the magical might he had gained from these texts, ended up gathering the strongest wizards in the Old Dominion and in the entirety of humanity to cast Hasla out of the heavens, killing them or at least severing their tie with humanity. As the story goes, Hasla in their fury tried to kill humanity several times over on the way down, but the biggest and most successful attempt was when, through their crying screams, they had found the Horsemen of Death, and they ended up fusing with them to become some kind of unholy abomination. See, Hasla is a god of human life, made from creation. The Horseman was a creation of death, made from destruction. These are two polar opposites, the binary of a thing that exists and a thing that doesn't, yes and no, so they shouldn't be able to mix together. And thus, when they did, you have the birth of an ungod, who has control over undeath. Unlife is a good way to describe it. Anyone who worshipped Hasla, past or present, was either now killed and revived as an undead monster, or was revived as an undead monster if they were already dead, and they had one idea that was placed directly into their brain, and that was kill all living humans left on planet Earth. Yeah, Hasla was not McFucking around. Thus, the birth of the Old Dominion had occurred. Now, there is a lot that I'm going to be skipping here, but Hasla manifested physically into like a body to kill humanity themselves, and in their hubris ended up dying in a sense. Basically, their sense of individuality and willpower were severed from their physical and magical might. Thus, the magic to keep the undead around was still kind of just ambiently around, but they had no direction. Their powers greatly weakened. New leaders and lesser gods of Hasla basically started to amass at the necropolis city of Capitus to do nothing more than plot to kill all life and politically bicker because they're still humans at the end of the day, right? God, I love the Old Dominion. If you've made it this far, type praise Hasla in the comments so I know you're a real one, because goddamn, they're one of my favorite factions. They are my main faction for the Last Argument of Kings, and as someone who's been painting them, plus one of the other factions we've been talking about here, they are just so fun. Anywho, there are technically 3 groups of humans who survived the fall of Hasla who were directly involved with it. These are the ones that were the members of the Old Dominion. You'll see at the end, there's one that was not part of the Old Dominion, but let's one step at a time. First, the remnants of the survivors who fled the city of Capitus as it was falling apart. These individuals were protected by the last of the Dominion's legions. See, there was one Dominion legion that was cast out because they didn't really like them, because they didn't worship Hasla, but they were allowed to exist because they had a job to do. They worshipped another god known as Cleon, a god of soldiers and warriors. These individuals went on to to found many different smaller kingdoms on the coastline of this location known as the Bitter Sea, creating a new community in more of a knightly Arthurian Gothic aesthetic, ruled by various different minor and major kings known as the 100 Kingdoms. Their biggest strength is that the last legion's remnants still exist to this day. The last legion had fought alongside Cleon, who had also manifested in order to fight against Hasla for months on end with almost no breaks, and in the process had become some of the greatest soldiers and warriors in history. Their practices were then handed down with a high degree of scrutiny and strictness to the 6 orders that now live amongst the 100 Kingdoms. Each one of them is an apolitical secular group who trains to defend humanity in their own way. Some strike out at the enemies of mankind, and some are focused more on defending the 100 Kingdoms. Most just depend on the way they decided to prosecute the war against Hasla's undead horde back in the day. So, with that out of the way, let's go back a bit. Remember those 2 guys that found out that Hasla was going insane, and one of them just fucked off and stole all of the books? Yeah, he founded the successor to the greatness that was the Dominion of Hasla at its peak in the city-states. Think kind of like an ancient bio-clockwork tech Greece, with a heavy slant towards Spartans and Greek mythology. Minotaurs and a lot of clockwork stuff are kind of abound here. Basically, with the info gained, this individual founded these small city-states across the map, each one with a minor shard of godhood in it, similar to that of Hasla's origins, but not nearly as strong. Using the info gained fostered them into lesser gods that would protect and work with these people, though using their worship more as a secular ritual to achieve a rite. They are kind of weird because there is a bit of a religious slant to them, but it is weird. Their entire society is based around philosophy, culture, and science. Also, the weird fucked up science is known as alchemy, and it allows them to make weird homunculus creatures sometimes. I mean, they do gotta use all those books they stole for something. They might as well make weird homunculus creatures. Neat. So city-states were made by that one guy. The other guy, after tearing a god out of the sky, was kind of feeling himself, decided to scrounge up the remaining mages, and using their magic, were able to protect themselves from the fall of Hasla. They skedaddled to the edge of the map. I think it was stated to the east of where the 100 Kingdoms are, where there is just ocean. No land to go, and with billions of evil Roman zombies in their minds, hot on their heels, they really didn't want to be turned into corpses anytime soon, so using the magic they had gathered, they channeled their whole might into just creating a new landmass for them to live on, sprouting volcanoes from the oceans in order to create stone, using ice to cool it down so that it wouldn't burn them when they walked on it. Sculpting the land to meet their needs, they founded a kingdom on a principle of elemental balance, summoning actual true and honest elementals and creatures bound to the primordial idea of balance. They were basically seeking to master the elements as a whole. The sorcerer kings were created from this, and this is one of those factions. There were some other refugees prior to this who had shown up that worshipped a god that was not linked with Hasla entirely, and that was Nenua, the mother, and they were allowed entry just because they were not a part of the plan, but they were never allowed to integrate with the Society of the Sorcerer Kings, which I feel is kind of weird because, you know, other creatures of balance were there, like the Rakshasa, the Jinn, and a whole mess of weird little elemental Eldritors, but I guess because they weren't on the travel manifest, they got the boot. Kind of lame, but whatever, they're at war now, sort of. It's a weird society. So with their superpowers of super magic, they were able to basically collapse the land bridge linking them to the main continent so more people wouldn't show up. One more human faction after this, and that is the one that is actually not linked to the Old Dominion really at all. To be honest, they are kind of one of the most badass of the entire setting, and those are the Nords, an entire society of people who agree that living in the frigid wastelands of the North fucking blows. There are werewolves, there are giant boars that want to kill you, but by God, does that actually beat being stuck in a political hellscape, which I guess. These are humans who have adapted to living off of almost no food, no water, and damn near nothing else for thousands of years, fighting off gigantic evil boars, fighting off monsters, fighting off giants, because yes, the Jotnar of Norse myth were just on occasion throwing rocks at them and taking the tiny people as slaves, if not for food. So in between raiding the seas of the Dominion of Hasla and other minor kingdoms to get resources to survive, fighting off giants, they found that hey, maybe gods are real, as the gods of the Nords actually did manifest. The Vanir and the Aesir, led by Odin and all the normal cast members you'd expect, helping these humans take back their lives and empowering some of them greatly. The strongest of the Nords after tournaments were abducted by their gods and promised to be turned into the Einherjar, a super warrior caste of superhuman warriors to be only released for the days of Ragnarok, the end times, which were coming. The death of all gods was seen, and the gods were trying to prepare to go against that. Well, Ragnarok came and went, and due to the betrayal of one of the gods, Loki, the Einherjar were never released. The lands grew cold with Fimbulwinter, and the gods were killed for their efforts. And yet the Einherjar were nowhere to be seen, at least for a while, and they started to show up. Well past their due date, definitely confused, but also in a small trickle, not so much an avalanche of warrior monsters. These genetic freaks, all resembling Scott Steiner if he was 8 feet tall in his peak, ended up mingling with the population of the Nords, leading them to greater heights of just survival, keeping the giants at bay further and also striking deals with them to work with each other every now and then. They ended up actually procreating, and the offspring of these Einherjar ended up being imperfect, twisted half-beings, like the werewolves, the trolls, ogres, and sometimes just individuals who could speak with animals and had a keen sense of smell and hearing, but never felt comfortable in society. But the Nords survive, where others do not. They go on raids to secure supplies and have a very strong martial culture, which I admire greatly. Their models are fantastic. The fun thing about the Nords, outside of the model range and the lore I just said being awesome, everything I just told you, from the perspective of the Nords, is 100% correct. They 100% believe that that's what happened. Yeah, it's a lot weirder than that, baby, but if you want to know what actually happened, let me know in the comments, because it is such a long-ass story. I don't even know if I could truly touch it here, but I'll give you a hint. It was actually the spires fucking around a bit in the north that caused everything to just get out of hand. Oh, and speaking of the spires, the next two factions are in their own kind of category of weird, as they represent what happens when the spires fucks around a little bit too much. Let's talk about the wadrun. See, when the dwome absorbed the spirit of the horsemen of war, they were a bit cantankerous at the best of times, and very rarely in this setting is anybody at their best. So what happened next is they tended to take any slight quite personally, seeing as the spires created them with the help of the dragons, and they were slaves to the dragons. The spires were still making dudes to basically be a slave clone caste. They took exception to this as a bad thing and decided to wage war against them. This was kind of during that period, during the fall of Hasla, where the spires kind of needed a way to defend themselves better than usual, so that's when they started to cook up a plan. They were going to make the perfect race of soldiers. These would be massive warriors, able to survive any combat and kind of scour the lands of this world. There were many different trials and different subspecies created, but in general, the wadrun were about 7 feet tall, rippling muscle, greenish, and pretty fucking hard to kill. That's right, these are the orcs of the setting. Albeit they are quite a bit different. Exhibiting a tribal way of life, the wadrun are weird. They have a bunch of hard limiters on their lifespan to keep them from outpacing the entirety of the spires and being able to be easily dealt with towards the end when the spires want to either take over or destroy. I don't know. They're kind of divided upon what they want, but whatever. They basically kind of work like Saiyans from Dragon Ball Z, where as they age, they hit a peak and then they stay at that peak until like a week before they die. As in, they're going to be peak physical health until like maybe like 5 days before their heart stops, and in that 5 days they like shrivel up like a dying spider, which unfortunately their old age is only between like 40 and 50 years at most. That's another hard limiter. Their organs have to work very hard to preserve them. Their metabolism blasts really, really fast. They have to eat a lot in order to preserve themselves, and that's another side effect of that. They have to eat a lot, and if they don't, they die really quickly. It's actually surprising how quick they can starve to death. These limits were kind of put in place to make them the perfect soldiers, but with the right effort, you could easily starve them out or kill them, you know? The big thing with them is the advent of their religion, which is multifaceted, but alongside it is the speakers. These individuals, for lack of a better term, can speak to animals to varying degrees and able to command them. And what kind of animals exist in the wastelands where the wadrun live? live fucking dinosaurs? Yeah, it's a faction of orcs that ride dinosaurs, and might I add, biblically accurate dinosaurs, as they have feathers and shit. Regardless, they are so damn cool, but the next faction is one that has kind of taken my local playgroup by storm, is the Weaver Courts. Remember when I haphazardly mentioned the dragon spire war thing that led to the creation of the dwome? Yeah, it also led to a small faction of the spires being led off into this mystical forest. They abandoned the idea of biomancy completely and 100% dedicated themselves to life binding, with a new society based around mingling with the population of trees and insects and animals. You have this new faction, the Weaver Courts, and they are divided amongst several different seasons, which are basically their different temperaments as well as their different ideologies and different courts. Same deal, just different aesthetics, basically. They are heavily inspired by Celtic mythology, and I fuck with them so much. If I hadn't already wanted to play two other factions slightly more, these are kind of my third place, so whatever. Oh, and also, as someone who speaks a little bit of Gaelic, whenever you see this word, which is spelled S-I-D-H-E, or anything that has like I-D-H-E in general, it's actually pronounced like a soft V mixed with an F. Like this miniature right here, the name would actually be pronounced Taushiv, which I think is really cool. At least that's me using what little of the Scottish dialect that I actually know. I could be wrong, because I don't know, this game is made by people from Greece, so I don't know what they know about the Gaelic tongue. Maybe they're just making it up. Either way, the Weaver Courts bind with the world and animals around them, exchanging parts and having a complex but peaceful political structure. They are one of the more chill factions, even having technically the last remnants of the dragons in their midst, but that is a tale for another time. The last faction, and probably my favorite faction aesthetic-wise in, man, I want to say all of wargaming, but I'm not 100% certain on that yet, so I don't want to commit, is the Euroni. See, in the center of the world of Ea is basically hell, a molten core of destruction. There are sentient beings of destruction there who want to smash, kill, burn, you name it, it's corn as all hell. But the big thing is sometimes they can actually hear wayward prayers of human mortals topside in the prime domain. This had led to a small subsection of these demons being able to listen to them and sometimes paying attention to them. An even smaller subsection of these individuals who understand what they're saying and actually interpret a great degree of meaning from it. In Ea, there's a land of esoteric beliefs, choosing to worship balance, the elements of the world, fire, water, earth, wind, and spirit. Only when in balance with the five paths can someone reach enlightenment. Thus, when these demons began to practice the arts of balance through meditation and peaceful practices, the ideals of the five elements ended up kind of ascending them higher and higher, and eventually they gained corporeal bodies, becoming flesh and blood on the mortal plane. These entities took on the forms of mythological figures from this culture, and thus the Euroni were born. Demons of destruction who worship and seek to meditate on balance. They all represent a different ideal of the five I mentioned, but have kind of reached a state of ego death in a sense, where they do recognize themselves as a singular entity with a personality, but they more identify with the ideal that they represent than anything else. They are literally just a band of yokai who exist in harmony with nature, but also really like killing shit because I don't know, it helps them reach enlightenment better. I love their designs, I love how simple but cool their premise is, and their gameplay gimmick is so neat, at least in First Blood. Basically, in the game, you have these unit cards. You face them face up with the unit's description on it. Each card is linked with a unit, so Old Dominion Legionnaires has the Old Dominion Legionnaires card. You activate this card during your turn to state who you're activating. Once you do that, you move your miniatures, and then your opponent gets to do the same thing, flipping the card face down when you're done. But the Euroni don't have that. Instead of command cards, as they're called, they have ideal cards. 5 ideal cards representing the 5 elements that I mentioned. And you can activate any Euroni with any ideal card, but if you activate an ideal card that aligns with the specific personal ideals of the miniature in question, they get a bonus from it. So a guy who more aligns with fire gets the fire bonus. The guy who aligns with earth gets the earth bonus. It's so cool. But the game is filled with gimmicks like this, like the old Dominion. They kind of have this inverse hive mind thing where they actually are literally sharing a brain cell. So the more that the opponent kills off of them, the less they are hogging it, and the more dark magic is in the air, so they can do more per turn. The stronger they get, the less they have to share their brain, meaning they get stronger the longer the game goes on. It's just, I'm just smitten. Though, it's still not the best rule set I've ever played. That title is still up in the air with Malediction. I'm getting close to swapping it though. This game is really, really good. The factions are all cool and incredibly unique. There is no missing with them. None of the miniatures are bad. All of them are fun and whimsical. They have good business practices, such as at minimum being able to use minis in both games, regardless of like where you bought them. Looking at you, GW, making it harder to use any factions in more than one game, but it plays smooth and the company has been a delight to work with so far, or at least communicate with. So go in the comments and let me know how you feel. Which faction is your favorite? And if you pick up a box, let me know. The links are in the description and you know what code to use. Special thanks to my channel members for supporting me. And with your help, I am able to do these videos. Fun fact, doing non-40K videos is kind of a crapshoot. It's sometimes good and very beneficial to my channel, and sometimes so bad that it makes me concerned for my financials. So, with all that in mind, I'm not going to stop doing this. I love talking about war games, even if it's bad for my channel, and with your guys' help, I can do this. So, if you want to support this kind of behavior, feel free to become a channel member, but for everybody else, thank you for helping. Thank you all once again for watching, and until next time, praise Hasla. Or else.